Nuclear bomb in Babylon cylindrical seal. Babylon cylinder seal from 600 BCE shows nuclear bomb and explosion made during the era of Nebuchadnezzar II, who was a Chaldean king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. When I first saw that, I thought it was some kind of a Photoshop joke. I'm still not convinced that it isn't. What else could that be? If it's real, which they say it is, cylinder seals were invented around 3500 BC in the Near East at the contemporary sites of Susa in southwestern Iran and Uruk in southern Mesopotamia. Made from hard stones, these seals were used as an administrative tool, a form of signature, as well as jewelry and as magical amulets. Later versions would employ notations with Mesopotamian cuneiform. The seal imprint on clay shows King Nebuchadnezzar II, who ruled between 605 and 562 BCE, releasing a large constructed form, which appears similar to the modern-day atom bomb or nuclear bomb. It looks like Fat Man, or was that the other one? Fat Man and Little Boy. Fat Man and Little Boy. This explodes into a cloud of dust, a mushroom cloud no less, sending weapons of warfare in all directions, accompanied by 8 pointed stars of Ishtar, who is goddess of war. The same tree, by the same artisan, had appeared on the other seal, but this tree bore no fruit. Instead, it was dropping its dead leaves as it died or affected by nuclear radiation. The intaglio was covered into a cylinder of gold, capped on one end by polished lapis lazuli, and on the other end by a flat seal carved in gold with the symbol of Ishtar, an 8-pointed star. Seen on the seal depicts Ishtar, goddess of both love and war, with the weapons of war held in a peaceful attitude, and with her garments opened to expose her body. A priest and priestess are bowing before their goddess. A tree bearing fruit serves as a backdrop to this peaceful scene of Ishtar and her worshippers. Boy, it sure don't look like that to me. It looks like that guy's bent me. Doesn't look like they're bowing, but I guess they probably are. But why would he have him behind her and holding on to her waist? The text from the seal in first picture reads,
Chatting.ag-neg2.do-you-are-you-3 Localcatu.dinger.ra E2.galbaru14 Chapaliam.shu.rin.
It says, it's really hard to read. Sha, Dinger, Egg, Nij, Du, Uru, Google, Dinger, Gal, Uru, Sha, Pal, I'm, Shu, Rin. That's what it says. Translation of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, palace of Sumer, beneath the furnace. There must be furnaces beneath the palace of king, which produce such nuclear weapons. Nebuchadnezzar II freed Babylon from Assyria and expanded his kingdom, and created such technical wonders as the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. They've never actually proven that they existed. And the Ishtar Gate. This must be one of those scientific developments during his regime. This seal indicates a secret of old methods of destruction that when the situation is out of control could be used to destroy not just the single city of Babylon, but an entire nation surrounding it. I mean, that is nothing short of jaw-dropping WTF. If that existed, then it's pretty likely that there really was a nuclear war in ancient times. As crazy as that sounds. What else could that be? Unless it's a prank. I'll leave it for you to decide. Hubble traces collision in Running Man Nebula. Any parent of newborns know just how powerful even small things are. The same is true in space, where baby stars in a section of a nebula or gas cloud create a series of powerful shock waves visible in a new Hubble Space Telescope image. Now, as far as I know, there is no gas and wind in space, only plasma and current. Hubble was on the hunt for how young stars influence their environment, and this image of Herbie Haro HH45 gives abundant evidence to go all inception for a moment. This object is embedded in a nebula called NGC 1977, which itself is part of the larger Running Man set of 3 nebulas. So you can see this is a rather complex neighborhood in which the stars are growing up. In HH45, what we see here is a rare manifestation of a nebula that happens after a newborn star spews hot gas, plasma, NASA noted. This activity collides with the gas, plasma, and dust around it at hundreds of miles per second, creating bright shock waves. Agency personnel wrote in a statement, "The Hubble image shows 2 sets of ionized gases as the collision strips away charged electrons from their atoms. Blue shows ionized oxygen, while purple indicates ionized magnesium." Researchers were particularly interested in these elements because they can be used to identify shocks and ionization fronts, NASA said. Ionization is a process which an atom or molecule acquires a negative or positive charge by gaining or losing electrons. The resulting electrically charged atom or molecule is called an ion. Hubble is coming back online from a synchronization glitch that occurred on October 23rd and sent its science instruments into safe mode. But while Hubble personnel get its instruments back to normal, there is lots of work available from previous investigations. The 31-year-old observatory was last serviced in person in 2009 and has not been visited by astronauts since. The space shuttle retired in 2011 due to inaccessibility with current spacecraft. Hubble telescope captures stunning image of star-forming Prawn Nebula. There's something that grabbed my interest. Hyperdimensional portal. Could Stonehenge be under the influence of Saturn? The purpose and complexity of Stonehenge continues to baffle researchers. Could it be a sacred cosmic calculator or an ancient portal still active today? For centuries, historians and archaeologists have puzzled over the many mysteries of Stonehenge. The prehistoric monument that took Neolithic builders an estimated 1,500 years to erect. I highly doubt that. You think that it should have took them that long to build it? It doesn't look that complicated. But those people, did you see the size of their brains? People that lived before us had twice the brain capacity, if those were truly the ones. Located in southern England, it is comprised of roughly 100 massive upright stones placed in a circular layout. While many modern scholars now agree that Stonehenge was once a burial ground, they have yet to determine what other purpose it served, and how a civilization without modern technology or even the wheel produced the mighty monument. They didn't have the wheel. Its construction is all the more baffling because while the sandstone slabs of its outer ring hail from local quarries, scientists have traced the bluestones that make up its inner ring all the way to Preseli Hills in Wales, some 200 miles from Stonehenge. It sits on Salisbury Plain. The contents: 1. The mysterious events at Stonehenge site. 2. The connection between the ley lines and the Stonehenge and the caduceus symbol. Could Stonehenge be under the influence of Saturn? Saturn is a fascinating planet because in Greek mythology it was Kronos, who was actually the Titan, the ruler of all the gods, and Zeus, Jupiter, had to overthrow Saturn in order to survive because Kronos was swallowing his own children. And there's something to be said for this relationship of Saturn to Satan. Though we find this theory a little odd, but the Saturn's association with time is very important because these stone circles often seem to reflect the idea of the passage of time. The time itself is the oldest devil in this universe. What do we know as humans? The one thing we all run up against that we cannot defeat is time. Da Vinci called it the ravager of all things. So Saturn, as this sort of ring lord, is actually Lord of the rings that influence time in itself. In all the forms of ancient mythology, even in Hindu and Sumerian texts, Saturn is always considered a very destructive planet, and it's difficult to understand exactly why. It was our first sun. Each planet has a certain resonance and similarities through mythologies around the world, though they were independently created from entirely different cultures. Mars for war. Pluto is sort of the outlier. Venus is for love. But Saturn has been this sort of monster in mythological history. These ideas have challenged some to look at Stonehenge differently than they had before. Well, they both start with an S. What does the placement of the stones aligning with Saturn have to do with our space-time reality? Is it possible that Stonehenge, with its placement of stones to represent Saturn, the Moon, and the Sun, is actually telling modern-day humans to remember who we are and where we came from, and who our first star was? An underworld connection. Ancient people may have created cave art while hallucinating. Yes, and Stone Age people may have deliberately ventured into oxygen-depleted caves to paint while having out-of-body experiences and hallucinations. According to a new study, by analyzing cave paintings from the Upper Paleolithic period, some 40,000 to 14,000 years ago, researchers at Tel Aviv University discovered that many were located in narrow corridors or passages deep within navigable cave systems with only artificial light. The study focuses on decorated caves in Europe, primarily Spain and France, and offers an explanation of why cave painters would choose to decorate areas deep within cave systems. It seems that the Upper Paleolithic people hardly used the interior of the deep caves for daily household activities. Such activities were carried out mainly in open-air places, rocky shelters, or cave entrances. The study reads, "But why would people go through the trouble of walking through narrow cave passages to make art?" To answer this question, a group of researchers at Tel Aviv University focused on a characteristic of such deep, narrow caves, especially those that require artificial light. And that is enigmatic, isn't it? To navigate. low levels of oxygen. The researchers ran computer simulations of model caves with different passageway lengths that lead to slightly larger hall areas where paintings may be found, and analyzed the changes in oxygen concentrations if a person was to stand in the different parts of the cave burning a torch. Fire, such as that from torches, is one of several factors that depletes oxygen inside caves. They found that oxygen concentration depended on the height of the passageways, with the shorter passageways having less oxygen. In most of the simulations, oxygen concentrations dropped from the natural atmosphere level of 21% to 18% after being inside the caves for only about 15 minutes. Such low levels of oxygen can induce hypoxia in the body, a condition that can cause headache, shortness of breath, confusion, and restlessness. So increases the hormone dopamine in the brain, which can sometimes lead to hallucinations and out-of-body experiences. According to the study, for caves with low ceilings or small halls, the oxygen concentration dipped as low as 11%, which would cause the more severe symptoms of hypoxia. The researchers hypothesized that ancient people crawled into these deep, dark spaces to induce altered states of consciousness, according to Ran Barkai, co-author and professor of prehistoric archaeology. Painting in these conditions was a conscious choice designed to help them interact with the cosmos. It was used to connect with things, said Barkai. We don't call it rock art. It is not a museum. Cave painters thought of the rock face as a membrane connecting their world to the underworld, which they believed to be a place of abundance, Barkai explained. The cave painting depict animals such as mammoths, bison, and ibex, and their purpose has long been debated by experts. The researchers argued that the caves played an important role in the belief systems of the Upper Paleolithic period, and that the paintings were part of this relationship. It was not the decoration that made the caves significant, but quite the opposite. The importance of the chosen caves was the reason for their decoration, the study reads. Barkai also suggested that the cave paintings could have been used as part of a kind of rite of passage. Given the evidence that children were present, additional research will examine why the children were brought into these deep cave areas, as well as investigate whether the people were able to develop resistance to low oxygen levels. The findings were published on March 31st in Time and Mind, the Journal of Archaeology, Conscience, and Culture. It just could have possibly been that the oxygen content was higher. I don't know. It's just a guess. But some of these paintings, they look modern. They look like really modern art. I understand why they think that modern art has nothing on them, because they do look splendid. I think they're marvelous. Yeah. It's cosmology, geology. I don't think they have a clue. Cave paintings were not the only ancient art. There were also many, and of course there are also the Wandjina paintings from the Aborigines in Australia, and there are paintings in South America. Basically, there are cave paintings all over the world. A lot of the ones on the outside, though, I believe they were painting what they were seeing in the sky. And they weren't tripping, but they could have been. It just depends, really. There is the stoned ape theory, where some type of man discovered tripping and expanded our brains. Mushrooms, shrooms, psilocybin, peyote, mescaline. Saturn and Jupiter. The history of this pair, the ancient Kronos and Zeus, or Saturn and Jupiter, as reflected in many traditions all around the world, tells a story that has nothing in resembling the sedate and uneventful circling of these bodies on their orbits that modern astronomy asserts as fact. Saturn and Jupiter are very much like the Sun. Were they not planets, they would be considered stars, like our Sun. Jupiter is nearly 330 times more massive than the Earth, and Saturn 80 times. Both planets are covered with gases which are in constant motion, like the gaseous atmosphere of the Sun. The Sun has 9 satellites and numerous asteroids and comets. Jupiter has at least 14 satellites. Of course, this was written a long time ago. Now it is known to have 79, I do believe, and several asteroids and comets. Saturn has 10 known satellites at this time, I think 82 now, and 4 or 5 comets constitute the Saturnian family. Though these comets do not circle around Saturn itself, they are commonly regarded as related to the orbit of Saturn. Were Jupiter and Saturn free from the bonds of the Sun, they could be considered as stars or suns. Were 2 such stars set in space close to one another, they would constitute a double star system, both stars circling around a common focus. As told in the picture that emerges from comparative folklore and mythology, presents Saturn and Jupiter in vigorous interaction. Suppose that these 2 bodies approached each other rather closely at one time, causing violent perturbations and huge tidal effects in each other's atmospheres. Their mutual disturbance led to a stellar explosion, or nova. As we have seen, a nova is thought to result from an instability in a star, generated by a sudden influx of matter usually derived from its companion in a binary system. If what we call today Jupiter and Saturn are products of such a sequence of events, their appearance and respective masses must formerly have been quite different. A scenario such as this would explain the prominence of Saturn prior to its cataclysmic disruption and dismemberment. It must have been a larger body than it is now, possibly of the volume of Jupiter. Interestingly, for certain reasons, G. Kuiper assumed that Saturn originally was of a mass equal to that of Jupiter. At some point during a close approach to Jupiter, Saturn became unstable, and as a result of the influx of extraneous material, it exploded, flaring as a nova, which, after subsiding, left a remnant that the ancients still recognize as Saturn, even though it was but a fraction of the celestial body of earlier days. In Saturn's explosion, much of the matter absorbed earlier was thrown off into space. Saturn was greatly reduced in size and removed to a distant orbit. The binary system was broken up, and Jupiter took over the dominant position in the sky. The ancient Greeks saw this as Zeus victorious over his father, forcing him to release the children he earlier had swallowed, and banished him to the outer reaches of the sky. In Egyptian eyes, it was Horus Jupiter assuming royal power, leaving Osiris to reign over the kingdom of the dead. If the descriptions of Saturn as a sun mean anything, Saturn must have been visible in the time before its explosion as a large disk. If this was the case, the increased distance between the Earth and Saturn could have been the result of the removal of the Earth from its place, or of Saturn from its place, or both. Saturn could be removed only by the planet Jupiter, the sole member of the planetary family more powerful than Saturn. And indeed, the myth says that Saturn was removed by Jupiter. Immanuel Valkovsky. In Worlds in Collision, wrote of events that may theoretically take place in the future. Some dark star like Jupiter or Saturn may be in the path of the Sun, and may be attracted to the solar system and cause havoc in it. While in 1950 both planets were assumed by astronomers to be covered by thick layers of ice, they are now known to be star-like in their composition and thermal properties. In the case of Saturn, H. Spencer Jones, Life on Other Worlds, Macmillan, New York, 1940, argued that Saturn must be coated with water ice, or frozen ammonia. Spencer Jones' book was published the same year, which Velikovsky drew very different conclusions about Saturn's thermal history and structure. The astronomer's conjecture was based on a simple calculation of the amount of heat reaching the planet. Saturn, being almost 10 times further away from the Sun than the Earth, had to have a mean temperature in the neighborhood of minus 155 degrees Celsius. The reasons why Velikovsky concluded that Saturn's temperature must be considerably higher than the accepted estimate were, first, in residual heat of the catastrophe in which Saturn was derailed from its orbit, and second, the radioactivity that resulted from the catastrophe must still be pronounced on Saturn. From the unpublished manuscript, The Test of Time, on top of all this, based on its past history, Saturn can be regarded as a star, and may have some of the mechanism that makes our sun burn with intense light. In 1966, Kellerman described his observations and measurements at a wavelength of 21.3 centimeters, which showed a temperature of 90 degrees Fahrenheit for the inner atmospheric layers, Icarus. Revised textbooks, taking account of the findings, began to speak of room temperature on Saturn, recorded in the 21 centimeter band, e.g. Fred Whipple, Earth, Moon, and Planets, 3rd Revised Edition, Cambridge, 1968. By 1972, measurements at radio wavelengths of 50 and 100 centimeters found unusually high temperatures, about 240 degrees Fahrenheit and 520 degrees Fahrenheit, respectively. Thus it appears that Saturn, like Jupiter, is not the entirely frozen wasteland it was once thought to be. D. McNally, Are the Jovian Planets Failed Stars? 1973. Soon it was realized that Saturn must have an eternal energy source, and is in fact more like a star than like a planet, not considered sufficiently massive to function as a true star. Science News, 1972. The article compares the view expressed only a few years previously by Carl Sagan that Saturn could not be an abode of life because of atmospheric temperatures several hundred degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, intelligent life in the universe. Measurements in the far infrared and sub-millimeter ranges published in 1977 indicate that the eternal energy source on Saturn lies within the range of 2.3 and 3.2 times the absorbed solar flux. Far infrared and sub-millimeter observations of the planets, 1977. The Astrophysical Journal. In other words, Saturn gives off up to about 3 times the amount of energy it receives from the Sun. At the beginning of 1980, analysis of measurements taken by Pioneer 11 during its flight past Saturn showed that the interior of the planet has a temperature exceeding 10,000 degrees Kelvin, which is considerably hotter than the surface of the Sun, less than 6,000 degrees Kelvin. A hypothesis that the protoplanet masses of Jupiter and Saturn were nearly the same was advanced by G. Kuiper, Sky and Telescope, March 1959.